In today's video, I'm going to share with you how you can bring some DIY elements into your wedding without compromising your overall vision. Welcome back to Newlyweds TV. If you're new to our awesome channel, our goal here is to serve as a guide for engaged couples as they embark on their wedding planning journey towards becoming newlyweds. If that's you, you should most definitely pop down and click the subscribe button right now. I'm Leanne Valdez, the founder of You Name It Events, a wedding and event planning company that has been doing all sorts of events for over a decade now. So let's jump right in. For many wedding planners, the idea of DIY is kind of a nightmare, as it can mean you're not using professional vendors and sometimes makes our jobs tougher. But the reality is that weddings are expensive and most people do not have access to an endless budget to do anything and everything they want. A little side note of real talk, one major myth about DIY is that it's always cheaper. Be sure to crunch numbers on your DIY projects to make sure that you're coming out ahead, especially if you also consider the value of your time. I would also consider how highly you prioritize a category when deciding whether or not to DIY. You may not want to risk DIYing something that is very high on your priority list. But if you're an all-pro crafter, you might want to DIY something so you can have direct control over it. Okay, enough about that. Now, on to what I think is really feasible to DIY. Keep in mind that the following thoughts don't mean that everyone should DIY these categories, or that I don't have professional vendors that I absolutely adore in these categories as well. The first is paper goods. For a lot of people, this is a category that they think isn't very important to them. If that's you, then you might want to consider doing some work yourself in this category. There's a lot of resources online for save the dates, printable invitations, paper goods like seating charts or place cards. A lot of the things you need you can find for free or cheap online. If that's where you're at with it, then don't spend a lot of money in this category and do some of these things yourself. Another possible option for DIY is in your dessert category. The first thing you want to do if you're considering DIYing any food or beverage, make sure it's okay with your venue because there are guidelines based on different communities and health codes that need to be followed. So figure that out first, but then you might consider doing something really fun or special with your desserts. For example, we had a couple who had different family members and friends make special cookies that were all different recipes, and they created a DIY cookie bar where people got to choose what cookies they wanted to have and take some home. That was a really fun way that they could DIY in a meaningful, special way, save some money, and also make it really special for their guests. If you have a friend that bakes, you might ask if they want to make you a small cutting cake and then get more affordable cake from a local bakery. There are lots of options for doing DIY desserts that you can look into, but first just make sure it's cool with your venue. The next one actually might be a little surprising. If your hair is easy to style, if you have short hair, or what you're looking for your wedding day hair is pretty simple, you might actually be able to do it yourself. Of course, if you want to try, I recommend practicing a couple times, making sure you get the right products and make sure your look lasts a long time for the day. A lot of people can do their own hair fairly well. On the flip side, I don't highly recommend DIYing your makeup because makeup on film and in print for cameras looks different than the makeup that you do every day. If you're thinking to DIY in the hair and makeup categories, I would always lean towards DIYing your hair versus DIYing your makeup. Another category you might consider doing DIY on is actually your officiant. So this is the person who actually performs your wedding ceremony. You want to make sure that this is legal wherever you plan to get married and that they are appropriately licensed to do that. You want to make sure that you don't actually accidentally make your wedding not legal. So figure that out first, and then find a friend or family member who's a good public speaker, who's able to command an audience and isn't nervous in front of others. Ask that person if they would be willing to do your wedding for you. Then look up some samples, find some online outlines that can help you put together your thoughts. That can be a wonderful way to DIY your wedding. It actually makes this part of things so much more personal when you take the time to do this part yourself. This can actually be a great enhancement and a way to save money. Another area that you might consider DIY is more of a logistical one, transportation. Some people love to have that fancy party bus or a fun limo, but if you're not really about that and you just need to get from point A to point B, you can skip the fancy transportation and save some money there as well. As a side note, if you do have a large wedding party, or if your event is in a big city, you might actually want to consider group transportation because it will make things easier if you can have your photographer and videographer just tag right along with everyone. But this is definitely one of those things that you want to manage on a case-by-case basis. Figure out for you logistically what makes the most sense. On the flip side, there are definitely some other DIY don'ts in my book. And one of those is one that you might hear about as a suggested DIY pretty often. I'm actually talking about flowers. A lot of people think it's easy to DIY your flowers, and I'm here to tell you it is not. It's one thing to get some flowers from the grocery store and throw them in a vase and have them look nice on your counter. It's a whole nother thing to make bouquets and boutonnieres and centerpieces that will last all day long in warm temperatures or cool temperatures, in the sunshine, and everywhere they need to be. So think twice before you DIY your flowers, and definitely talk to a florist as part of your research process when making that decision. One other quick thought about DIY, and also about the advice I'm sharing with you right now. These are just my opinions from my experience. You might find something else works better for you and your wedding. Feel free to make things your own and figure things out as best you can for yourself. And if you need help, get a planner. That's what we're here for. We do this all the time. We help couples with all different preferences, priorities, and needs. So just know, just because I said you might want to DIY your paper goods doesn't mean you have to. And just because I said you probably shouldn't DIY your flowers doesn't mean you can't. Show us some love by giving us a like on this video if you got any value out of the info I shared today. And if you're looking for more free wedding planning tips, look for some of our other videos with tours of venues, conversations with other awesome vendors, and much more. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.